Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back a few thousand years to a time when bronze swords gleamed under a Mediterranean sun, when gods still held grudges, and when the sea wasn't just a place to swim, but a living, unpredictable thing that could either cradle you home or chew you up. You're about to wander through the whole, tangled, adventurous, occasionally ridiculous saga of the Odyssey. You're the hero here, so yes, you'll be fighting monsters, sweet-talking queens, and maybe getting cursed by a sea god for the better part of a decade. And reality check, you probably won't survive this if you try it in real life, so maybe just let Homer handle the heavy lifting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Trojan War is finally over. 10 years of blood, bronze, and bragging rights have left the Greek army limping home, ships heavy with spoils, tempers still raw. You're Odysseus, king of Ithaca, famed for your cunning rather than your size. Troy burns. Behind you, the air still thick with smoke and history. You've earned your respite. The gods, as usual, haven't gotten the memo. Your crew waits for orders, eager to see their families. You promise them a swift return, but deep down, you know the sea has a personality problem. And the thing about ancient Greek seas, they don't just have storms, they have politics. Somewhere up there, Athena's rooting for you like a die-hard sports fan, while Poseidon's glaring like someone who just watched you ding his brand new chariot. Historians still argue whether the whole Poseidon feud starts here, or slightly later, but the tension is already there. Prickling under the sunny horizon, the wind smells of salt and fish oil from the oars. You pass small islands where the stones look like crouched animals, watching. Your men row, sing, and argue about which wine is better, Spartan or Cretan. You, however, are running mental maps through your head. You could hug the coast and take it slow, but the straight shot across the open sea is tempting. Dangerous, but tempting. Here's your first quirky fact. The Bronze Age Greeks actually navigated partly by watching bird flight patterns. Spot the gulls wheeling inland, and you know land's nearby. You, being you, use that, plus a gambler's instinct. You aim for speed, a straight shot home. The gods, naturally, take this as a challenge. Night comes on with a warm, purple sky. The oars slow. The men slump against the benches, and you lean back, feeling the creak of wood beneath you. The stars look close enough to pluck. You even find yourself smiling, thinking of Penelope and your son Telemachus, who must be practically grown now. The ship rocks gently, too gently. That stillness feels staged, like the moment in a play before the curtain whips back and chaos bursts in, and it does. A low growl rises from the sea, a sound deeper than thunder. Your men jolt awake as the first wave slaps the hull. Somewhere in the blackness beyond the torchlight, something enormous stirs. The sail jerks, the mast groans, and you're suddenly soaked to the bone. You bark orders, pulling ropes, bracing the rudder. The storm has come from nowhere, which, in Greek terms, means from somewhere very personal. You don't see him, but you feel him, Poseidon. The sea's anger rolls under you, an unsteady heartbeat. A wave smashes over the side, sweeping 2 men into the dark before you can grab them. You shout, but their voices vanish under the roar. Even now, historians still debate whether Homer meant storms like this as literal events, or as coded metaphors for political setbacks. Either way, you're not feeling very metaphorical when the deck's tilting 30 degrees. You fight for hours, knuckles white, teeth chattering. Then, just as quickly as it came, the sea quiets. The survivors slump, panting. Your ship is lighter now, not by choice. You scan the horizon, see no land, and taste the metal temps of dread. Whatever this was, it's not just weather. The war may be over, but the real Odyssey, well, it's just clearing its throat. The next dawn is pale and sticky. Your men glance at you with that mix of respect and fear they've had since Troy. You give them a grin that says we'll be fine because that's what captains do, even when their guts twist like a knotted rope. Somewhere ahead, Ithaca waits. You tell yourself you'll get there, eventually. The sun is barely awake when the sea begins to glitter in that suspicious way, as if it's hiding something shiny and dangerous beneath the surface. You've seen it before, the calm that comes when gods start whispering about mortals. Word has been moving faster than your oars. The gods have been gossiping about you. Olympus is never quiet for long. Athena, your longtime divine sponsor, is already up there advocating like an overly invested sports coach. He's clever, he's brave, he's the best shot at proving humans can survive your ridiculous obstacle courses. She's talking to anyone who will listen, Hermes, Hera, even Zeus, reminding them of your service at Troy. You, of course, are unaware of the exact transcript, but you can feel it in the breeze. But then there's Poseidon. If the sea god were a co-worker, he'd be the one still mad you took his parking spot 3 years ago. His grudge. Let's just say it involves his giant cyclopean son, but we'll get there. Right now, all you need to know is that he's decided you are not getting home easily. Historians still argue whether the ancient audience would have seen this divine feud as a morality tale about respecting authority, or just as entertainment, like the reality TV of the Bronze Age. Either way, the stakes are personal. You sail on, unaware that you're being drafted into what amounts to a celestial custody battle. Zeus tries to keep order, but gods have the same problem as humans. Once they've picked sides, they're all in. Hera likes you because Athena likes you. Ares is neutral, but easily bored. And Aphrodite is too busy with her own scandals to care. Poseidon, though, isn't playing by midday. The wind shifts a little too perfectly and your men cheer, thinking the gods have finally given you a break. The sail swells, the hull hums against the waves, and the ship slices forward like it remembers what home feels like. For a few hours, you let yourself believe this might be easy after all. Then you pass a rocky islet. On its highest point stands a figure in bronze armor, watching you without moving. The sunlight bounces off the helmet, making it impossible to see the face. You're tempted to shout, but something in your gut says don't. You just keep going, pretending you didn't notice, because in the world you live in, noticing is the fastest way to get cursed. That night, the crew eats salted fish and hard bread, grumbling about the lack of wine. One of them tells a story about a sailor who once claimed to see Apollo walking on the water. Did he live? Someone asks. The storyteller shakes his head. Nope, wave took him. This is the kind of cheerful conversation sailors have when they know the sea's listening. Here's your quirky tidbit for tonight. Ancient Greeks often poured a few drops of wine into the water before drinking themselves a tiny bribe to the sea god. You've started doing it more often lately. Can't hurt, right? Around midnight, as the moon throws a silver path across the water, you hear voices. Not human ones, lighter, thinner, like wind threading a reed flute. They come and go with a swell, never close enough to understand. The crew shifts uneasily. They've heard it too. By dawn, the wind dies completely, leaving you stranded in a glassy, breathless sea. Oars go into the water, muscles burn, tempers fray, and somewhere far below, you imagine Poseidon watching, tapping his trident like a man waiting for his turn in the game. You'll move again, but only when he decides. You try to shake it off, focusing on the horizon. You tell your men stories from Troy, editing out the parts with too much blood, adding in a few jokes to keep them from staring too long at the unmoving water. You can almost hear Athena's voice in your head, telling you to keep your chin up. Keep moving, keep planning, because this isn't a straight race, it's chess, and the gods always make the first move. The oars bite into the water in slow, stubborn strokes. The the sound of wood against wave becoming a kind of heartbeat. Then, finally, the horizon gives you a smear of green an island, low and inviting, with hills that look soft even from this distance. The crew erupts in cheers, because any patch of land means fresh water, maybe fruit, maybe even a night without sleeping on planks. As you draw closer, you notice something strange. No columns of smoke, no sign of watchtowers or villages, no boats bobbing offshore. Just long beaches dusted with pale sand and a sweet smell riding the wind. Historians still argue whether Homer based this location on any real Mediterranean island, but if he did, it's lost to us now like so much else from the Bronze Age, swallowed by time and tide. You beach the ship in a crescent bay, the hull scraping up onto sand. The air is thick with floral perfume, so thick it almost makes you lightheaded. Some of your men fan themselves, their faces melting into lazy smiles. Better than wine, one says, breathing deep. You suggest scouting in pairs. Your men wander inland, where low trees drape themselves in blossoms that look like gold dusted with cream. Locals appear not threatening, not armed, just gentle. They're smiling in that way that feels warm and unsettling at the same time. Like someone who knows a secret you don't. They offer you fruit. Not like anything you've seen, small, waxy, petals curling back to reveal a pulpy heart. The first bite floods your mouth with sweetness, floral and honeyed, almost too much to process. The men start eating, laughing, reclining on the grass, as if they've been here forever. And that's when you notice they've stopped asking when they'll be home. Here's your quirky fact. The Greeks actually had a term for this kind of will-sapping comfort: apatheia, loss of all desire, which philosophers sometimes saw as a virtue. But for sailors on a mission, it's a trap. You take only one bite before spitting it out. The taste lingers like perfume, clinging to the roof of your mouth. You shake one man by the shoulders, asking if he remembers Ithaca. He blinks at you, slow as honey dripping, and says, "Ithaca? What's that?" Panic climbs your spine. You try dragging them back to the ship, but they resist, murmuring about staying just one more night. The locals smile and step aside, as if they've seen this play out 1,000 times. You think you hear laughter, but it's soft like the sound leaves make when wind brushes through them. You resort to force. The men you can carry, you carry. The rest you shove, cursing under your breath, until they're back on the sand, back in the shadow of the ship. You lock them aboard, posting a guard who hasn't tasted the fruit. The prisoners sulk, eyes glassy, like children denied their favorite toy. By dawn, the worst of it passes. Their memories return, in ragged chunks: Penelope's face, a child's laugh, the smell of their own hearths. They won't speak of the fruit, but their hands shake when they pass the untouched basket you left on the shore. As the sail snaps and fills, the island slides away behind you, shrinking into a smudge of green and gold. The men look back once, then forward. You keep your gaze ahead, jaw set. Whatever that place was, it could have swallowed you without a sound, leaving Ithaca not just unreachable, but forgotten. The sea stretches ahead, an endless, restless road. You can almost hear Poseidon chuckling somewhere beneath the waves, as if to say, that was just the warm-up. The sea is calm enough to lull your crew into song, though the lyrics are mostly nonsense about wine, women, and winning dice games. You let them have it. Morale is a fragile thing out here, but your eyes never leave the horizon. It's a jagged dark line this time, rising higher with every hour. By late afternoon, the cliffs are close enough to show streaks of pale stone, and the occasional scraggly pine clinging to impossible ledges. You choose a cove for shelter. From the deck, you spot goats moving across the slopes like tufts of wool, caught in the wind. No sign of people, no columns of smoke, no docks. Still, the place smells faintly of sheep's milk and damp stone. Historians still argue whether this Cyclops Island was meant as a real location or pure invention. but anyone who's seen a volcanic coastline here in the Aegean will tell you it feels plausible enough to make you uneasy. You split the men into two groups, have to stay with the ship, have to follow you inland. The path is rough, cutting through scrub until you reach a hollow in the cliffside, an opening so large it could swallow your entire mast. Inside, it's cool and smells of hay and something tangy like cheese gone just past its prime. The floor is packed with straw, and at the far end, pens hold sheep and goats, their eyes catching the light in a way that feels just a bit too human. Along one wall, wicker baskets brim with cheeses, fat as fists and glistening with oil. Hospitality, one of your men whispers, reaching for a cheese. You hesitate. Greek custom demands a host greet you before you take anything, but the hunger is real, and you rationalize. You'll leave payment. You've barely settled in when a shadow darkens the entrance. It's not a trick of the light. Something truly massive has stepped inside. A single eye blinks in a face, broad as a shield, framed by hair like weathered rope. His shoulders nearly scrape the cave ceiling. The door, a slab of rock that must weigh more than your ship gets rolled into place with one shove. The air changes. Escape is no longer an option. He notices you and smiles. Here's your quirky tidbit. The word Cyclops in Greek means round-eyed, though scholars still debate if Homer's audience imagined them as literal one-eyed beings, or just metaphorical big-eyed folk from far-off lands. Standing here, you're pretty sure it's the first one. The giant Polyphemus, you'll learn, asks who you are. You try diplomacy, explaining you're travelers from Troy, seeking shelter. He nods, sits down, and without warning grabs two of your men and smashes them against the rock. The rest of you freeze. He eats quickly, messily, like a man chewing olives with the pits still in. That night is long. You hear the sheep shifting in their pens, the crackle of the giant's small fire, the faint wet sound of him gnawing bones. You think hard about how to survive. Killing him outright isn't an option. You'd never move that boulder blocking the entrance. By morning, you have a plan. You introduce yourself as Nobody, a name that earns a puzzled grunt. Then, you offer him strong wine from your stores, the kind that needs to be diluted but isn't. Polyphemus drinks deep, his one eye growing sluggish. He slumps, snores, and that's when you move, sharpening a wooden stake, heating it in the embers until it glows red. The moment you drive it into that eye, his scream shakes the cave. He thrashes, rolling the boulder aside to call for help from the other Cyclopes. "Nobody is hurting me," he shouts. And they, hearing that, go back to bed. You and your men cling to the undersides of the sheep as they shuffle out to graze. By the time Polyphemus realizes you're gone, the ship is already cutting the waves. But you make a mistake. From the safety of the sea, you can't resist shouting your real name. His roar follows you, and so does a prayer to his father. You feel the air shift. You've just turned a grudge into a curse. You put a lot of ocean between you and that howling cave. And for once the waves behave like they've remembered their manners. A clean wind pushes your prow, the sail billows, and the ropes hum music in cordage. But the sea is a gossip, and news of your Nobody prank travels fast. The breeze steers you toward a ring of islands that look like stepping stones scattered by a giant in a good mood. Smoke fingers curl from one volcanic cone on the horizon. Like a lighthouse invented by a dragon ant, your pilot murmurs that you're nearing the realm of Aeolus, keeper of winds. You beach the ship on a shore that smells of pumice and thyme. Dogs trot out to investigate, sleek, well-fed, and disarmingly friendly. Then the gate opens, and there he is. Aeolus Hippitates, the wind wrangler, beard neatly braided, cloak rippling as if it gets its own private breeze. Scholars still argue whether Aeolus is a god, a mortal king with divine hookups, or a job title, like manager of gusts. Whatever the resume, the hospitality is top tier. You and your crew are bathed, fed, and seated at a table so long it might qualify as a minor road. He listens to your tale, and when you reach the part where a one-eyed giant eats 2 of your friends before dessert, Iolaus winces like a host, hearing you found a hair in the soup. "Well," he says, "let's not have that happen again." Then he offers a gift so strange, you can actually hear your crew's eyebrows climb. He brings out a large leather bag stitched from an oxhide, fat as a festival wineskin, and ties its neck with a shimmering cord. He taps it, and the knot thrums. "All the contrary winds," he says, almost casually, "bound up for you. Keep it shut, and you'll have a straight ride home on the one fair breeze I'll leave loose." You run your hand over the hideworm, faintly buzzing, like a cat with secrets. The crew exchange looks they think you can't see. It's understandable. A bag of winds sounds like the kind of prize a trickster wins in a folk tale right before everything goes slapstick. You thank Iolaus, promise to guard the knot. And yes, because you've learned a thing or two, you pour a few drops of wine on the threshold when you leave. Remember the tiny bribe to the sea? For a day and a night the ship flies, so smooth, you could balance a goblet on the deck and not spill a drop. The men laugh, sing, and for the first time since Troy dip into long conversations about home that don't end with a sigh. Mainstream history moment as the sail sings. Those volcanoes you skirt, Lipari and Sister Isles, are part of the Ionian Islands north of Sicily, still named for this very windkeeper. In later tradition, ancient mariners watched Stromboli, the lighthouse of the Mediterranean, erupt with a dependable rhythm. It's been sputtering for thousands of years, a natural metronome for people who lived by tides. You glance back at its red punctuation, marks in the night, and take them as good omens. Also, free fireworks show 0 ticket fees. You don't sleep. You can't. That knot pulses at your feet like a captured heartbeat, and you know too well what happens when you ignore the obvious. So you tie the bag to the mast, double knot, triple check, and settle with your back against it. The stars drift like powdered salt. Around midnight, one of your younger sailors shuffles past, eyes flicking to the bundle. "Treasure?" he asks too casually. You smile in a way that says please stop talking forever, and he laughs it off, wandering away to check the lashings, which is sailor code for planning a heist badly. By dawn on the 10th day, yes, 10. The same number Troy took from you like a cosmic running joke. You sight a thin gray line that lifts your chest like a winch. Ithaca, your island's shoulders, the familiar cliffline, the smell you swear you can already taste. Wood smoke, goat, crushed rosemary. You can point out the notch in the hills where your house sits. The crew starts crying in that quiet way men think is invisible. You let yourself imagine Penelope at the loom, Telemachus tall now. Athena may be easing the door on its hinges so it doesn't creak when you walk in. You say nothing about Poseidon. You don't want to say his name this close to shore, like you'll jinx the landing. Exhaustion finally drags your eyes shut. You put your hand on the bag's cord as a promise and drift only for a moment, like a blink that lingered. Somewhere behind your eyelids, a whisper. Treasures don't hum, do they? Footsteps soft as cat paws, a knife's kiss against leather. You bolt awake to the sound of a very small pop that births a very big problem. The ship jerks, as if punched by a god in a hurry. The sail snaps, the mast bows, and the prow swings away from Ithaca in a sickening pivot. A mad chorus of winds north, clawing south, east, shrieking west, explodes from the torn bag and slap fights above your heads. Crew tumble like loose olives in a jar. Someone yells, "Who opened it?" Which is precisely the kind of question no one answers when everyone knows the answer. You wrestle the rudder with both hands and half your soul. But it's like trying to steer a dream. Joke 1. Because even disasters deserve a rim shot. You just invented the world's worst balloon, Animala. Hurricane shaped like regret. You fight. You curse politely PG-13. We're fine, and you lash that stupid bag shut again. but the horses are already out of the stable and galloping in opposite directions. The coastline of home dwindles to a smoky smudge. By the time the winds stop arguing and pick a single direction, it's the wrong one. Back to Aeolus. You beach on his shore with the spiritual energy of men who broke their neighbor's window and have to ask to borrow a broom. Aeolus, here's your story. Glances at the wrinkled bag, then at the guilty faces behind you. His hospitality cools a half step. The gods are sending a memo, he says carefully. If they loved you, you'd be home. They don't. For now, I won't fight them. That's the kind of line that leaves a bruise. You try persuasion, promises, a dash of charm, nothing. He's not angry. He's prudent. There's a difference that stings more. Here's your fringe tidbit while you try not to scream. Into a pillow. Later Roman jokesters told tales of street charlatans who sold bottled winds to gullible sailors, a gag so common it shows up in comedies. You'd laugh if your throat didn't taste like failure. You shove off again, and the deck feels heavier, not because of cargo, but because embarrassment gains weight in salt air. The crew won't meet your eye. You say nothing about punishment. The sea will handle that lesson better than you can. And besides, anger is a wind you don't need more of. Instead, you retie everything. You check every knot twice. You think, as you often do, about how leadership is part mapping, part mothering, and part pretending you're not terrified. Historians still argue whether the bag of winds was a poetic way to describe catching a long run of the seasonal Etesian breezes, and then losing them through human error. Maybe, or maybe a windkeeper really did cinch up the sky for you, with a cord you failed to guard for one drowsy minute. Either way, the result is the same story humans keep telling. You were almost there, and then you weren't. Joke 2, to keep the mood afloat. If you ever open a gift labeled "Some assembly required," and the instructions are just, "Don't open it. Take a nap after the finish line." Night falls. You can't see Stromboli anymore. Its rhythm is gone, replaced by your own breath and the slosh of the wake. You draw the crew close and talk quietly about patient winds, about how the sea forgives in long, slow gestures. You promise, you swear you'll learn from this. And because you're you, you add a tiny, crooked smile. Also, new rule: no one touches mysterious bags, not even the fun ones. Joke 3, soft as the star foam. Next time someone asks whether you brought souvenirs, you'll say, "Just trauma." It packs light. Somewhere above, you feel a cooler current slip onto your shoulders, sign the weather's changing, or a sign Athena hasn't given up. You set your course, eyes on the dark line where sea becomes sky. Home is there, unchanged, patient as stone. Between you and it lies whatever the wind wants. You breathe, match your chest to the swell, and tell the helmsman to hold true. The wind settles into a steady push, not friendly, exactly, but not hostile either. You take it because out here, not hostile is a compliment. Days pass in a salty blur. The crew finds a rhythm again, mending sails, swapping stories, betting on how many fish you'll catch before sundown. The horizon is clean, the sky widened till the water around you begins to change color. It shifts from a deep, inviting blue to a murkier green-brown, as if you've sailed into the shadow of something vast. The air thickens. You hear a low, distant roar, not like thunder, but like rocks grinding under pressure. It gets louder, steadier. Soon you see the coastline ahead, jagged and tall, with cliffs that look like the teeth of some ancient animal. And along those cliffs are towers, not elegant, whitewashed city towers, but rough stone columns, streaked with sea salt and crowned with watch platforms. Historians still argue whether this next stop, the land of the Laestrygonians, was based on any real Mediterranean culture, or a blend of coastal raider myths. Whatever the source, it's clear Homer didn't write them as the sort of neighbors you borrow sugar from. You guide the ship into a narrow fjord, the water eerily still under high rock walls. The inlet narrows, then widens into a hidden harbor dotted with strange, oversized fishing boats. You anchor near a wooden jetty, the silence pressing in. Only one man comes to greet you, a giant easily twice your height, his shadow stretching across the planks. He points toward the city beyond, a cluster of stone huts clinging to the cliff. You send a few men to explore. They disappear around a bend and don't return. When you send more to check, you hear the first scream. They come. Quickly then the Lastrygonians, men and women, both towering, skin bronzed by sea glare, arms roped with muscle. They wield boulders like they're apples. One by one, those stones arc through the air and come down on your ships. Wood splinters, masts snap like kindling. The sound is deafening, the air full of dust and screams. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some later retellings, these giants are said to have lived in perpetual daylight, with the sun rising almost as soon as it set. That might explain their size, or maybe just their bad tempers. You shout for your crew to cut the anchor ropes. The narrow harbor turns into a trap. The ships can't turn fast enough. One boulder smashes the deck beside you, showering you in splinters. Another lands squarely on a sister ship, driving it under in seconds. The Lastrygonians wade in, spears like tree trunks in their hands, plucking sailors from decks and hurling them against the rocks. The water churns red in a way you don't want to think about for too long. You don't try to fight to steer. Your ship alone is anchored closer to the open sea, and you ride the outgoing current like it's your last ally on Earth. The giants roar after you, their voices echoing off the cliff walls, but the distance grows. Soon the harbor mouth swallows them from view. When the coastline finally sinks behind you, you realize you're alone. Every other ship gone, dozens of men gone. It's just you and the handful who made it aboard before you escaped. Historians still debate whether the Lastrygonians were symbolic of sudden, catastrophic losses in ancient voyages, storms, piracy, disease, or simply a warning about unknown harbors. You can't say. You just know that the sea feels emptier now, in more ways than one. Your men sit in stunned silence. The deck smells of tar, salt, and fear. You think of Ithaca not as a place you want to reach, but as a place you must, if only so none of this is wasted. And in the quiet, you make a mental note. From now on, wide harbors only, and always keep the ship ready to run. You sail until the horizon looks like it's been ironed flat. Then a new island rises, a gentle shoulder of green with streams silvering down its sides, and a ring of forest that seems to breathe. The air here smells like thyme and something sharper, almost medicinal, the kind of scent that makes you check whether a plant will cure a headache or turn you into a cautionary tale. The crew eyes it with the haunted quiet that comes after Lastrygonian boulders and lost friends. You picked the widest cove, because wide harbors only was a promise you made to yourself, and you hold two promises even when the gods stand single quotes. From the beach, you hear animals, not the panicked bray of wild boar, but lions purring and wolves trilling, a sound halfway between a greeting and a spell. They pad out of the trees, golden-eyed and strangely polite, rubbing their flanks against your shins the way temple cats do when they want fish without looking needy. One of your men jokes, very softly, that you found the world's worst guard dogs. Another says they're better behaved than his cousin's goats. You hush them, because when animals act like this, someone is conducting the orchestra. You split the party. Half stay to guard the ship, the other half, led by your best scout, follow a ribbon of smoke through oaks and terebinths until a house appears along. Low hall nestled among clearing and herb beds, copper cauldrons steaming on tripods, the air sweetened by barley mash, and something floral that tingles the nose. The doorway is bright with woven hangings. Inside, a woman at a loom, hair like polished chestnut, voice like cool water poured into a hot cup. CIRCE. She looks up and smiles, the way a musician does when you've arrived just in time for your favorite song. She offers a chair, a bowl, a drink, the whole list of welcomes a guest should receive. Your men exhale. They've been waiting for the world to be kind again, and it feels like kindness to be seen, to be fed, to be called friends. She ladles out a dark, fragrant brew barley cheese, honey, and wine, with a pinch of herbs from those neat little beds outside, where the dew always looks fresh. A mainstream history moment to settle the scene. Bronze Age Greeks did brew, kiki and barley based, mixtures used in daily life and in mystery rites. It wasn't always magical, but it did blur the edge between hunger and trance. Your men drink. The room hums. Circe sings softly, her shuttle whispering through the warp, the loom beating time. And then, because spells are tidy when done by practiced hands, she taps each man with her wand, and their bodies buckle. Feet shrivel, snouts bloom, spines arc, and in a heartbeat the floor is a jittering confusion of bristles and squeals. Pigs, clean, plump, perfectly mortified pigs. They keep their minds for just a moment, enough to look at each other with human panic before the trough glows irresistible. Then they eat. You have never seen shame applied with such efficiency. Back at the beach, a survivor stumbles in two. Report what happened. You listen without interrupting, then strap on your sword the way a man puts on an apology. The forest darkens, not from shade, but from intention. Somewhere above, Athena's silence feels like a lifted eyebrow. You've got this, but maybe don't improvise the part where you get turned into bacon. At the wood's edge, another figure appears, quick, bright, ankle-winged in reputation, if not in actual footwear. Hermes. He leans in with that amused, conspiratorial tilt gods adopt when sharing cheat codes. In his hand, a white-flowered plant with a black root, smelling faintly of snow and lightning. Moly, he says, and he's right. Homer himself names it later, a word that tastes like iron when you say it. This will keep her song from binding your bones. Take it, and when she strikes, you strike back just to get her attention. He grins. Then be polite. You slide the herb beneath your tongue. It sits there cool and stubborn, like a pebble that knows secrets. Historians still argue whether moly was real. Some point to garlic relatives or Jimson weed. Others say it's the poet's way of naming courage, dressed as botany, or whether Ia Circe's Isle maps to Mount Circeo on Italy's coast, or a pure mythic nowhere. You keep walking. Either way, the house waits, sunlight pooling on its threshold. Circe greets you as she did the others. Chair, bowl, drink. You take a sip, just enough to taste the honey, then the wand touches your shoulder. Nothing changes. She frowns, which is somehow more terrifying than a roar. Her second tap is faster. Your answer is steel. You flash the blade until it kisses her throat, and her eyes deepen from charming hostess to professional, taking you seriously. She lifts her hands, steps back, and smiles, not frightened, but impressed, like a chess master who recognizes a rare move. You are the man Athena favors, she says. Well, let's talk. Joke one, whisper light. The fastest way to make friends is not usually hold a sword to their neck. But hey, different networking strategies for different kingdoms. You press her to undo the spell. She nods, taps her wand to the trough, and your men climb out of their pig shapes like they were bad outfits. They can finally take off. They rush you sheepish, literally, and you do not say a word about snouts or mud. Dignity is a clean towel, laid over yesterday, and you cover them in it. Circe apologizes with sincerity and a banquet. The wolves and lions recline like polite cousins. The wine warms you without catching fire in your veins. She shows you her storeroom jars of herbs, labeled with neat knotted cords, dried roots, and blossoms hung upside down. Fringe tidbit. Later, herbalists swore that singing to plants changed their virtues. A belief that makes strange sense here, where the hedges seem to lean closer when she speaks. Days slide into the kind of ease that erases corners. Rooms air out, with cedar smoke, baths, steam, and clean linen kisses skin. Circe walks you through glades where the air feels tuned, like a room before an instrument plays. You watch her at the loom warp stretched tight, weft crossing a pattern, appearing like a coastline emerging from fog. Weaving is its own kind of timekeeping, another quiet historical anchor. Greek households centered on the loom. Cloth was wealth, language, duty. Penelope's hands are in your mind every time the shuttle flies. You stay a year, yes, a whole year, easing into afternoons, where the sun lingers like a guest who refuses to leave because the stories are too good. You learn plants by scent and moonrise. Her laughter is a bell you can find in any room, and yet, even in sweetness, a small stone sits in your shoe. Ithaca. Penelope, at her loom. Telemachus, finding his father in the world, without having ever seen his face up close. Some nights you swear you hear the thrum of that old windbag's knot in your sleep. A reminder that almost home is not home. Joke 2. Soft as the sails drying. If self-care were a mythic phase, it's probably spa month with Circe cancel anytime. Terms apply. When the crew finally gathers, they stand straighter than when you arrived. 1. The oldest, clears his throat. Captain, he says, the island is kind, but kindness is not home. You nod. You tell Circe the same, and for a breath you see something like pride in her eyes, because the best magic is not the spell that keeps you, but the one that lets you go with your name intact. She doesn't sulk. She prepares you. Directions unroll like a map beneath her words. You must speak with the dead, yes. Actually go down to the borders, where shadows answer if you want a route that gets you past the traps set in the sea like teeth. She teaches you the rites, the trench, the libations, the strict order. She dresses you in knowledge the way she draped you in linen, precise and steady. And she warns you, sirens, Scylla, Charybdis, the sun's Catalius, do not touch the livestock. We cannot stress this enough. You remember the rule about mysterious bags, and try to imagine adding no sacred cattle barbecues to the ships. Code of conduct. Joke 3. A smile in the rigging. If you ever write a manual for your crew, Chapter 1 is don't eat things the gods put name tags on. At dawn, the lions escort you to the beach. Circe sets a hand on your shoulder, not a spell, just a benediction. The ship noses out. The oars find their measure, and the island shrinks behind you, its green softness tucking itself back under the sea's blue quilt. The air cools. North looms, not as a direction, but as a mood. Somewhere far ahead, at the world's wet edge, a door waits where no door should be. You steady the tiller. The dead have answers. You just have to ask the right questions. The sea feels heavier as you row north, the sunlight dulling on the water's surface like metal left in the rain. Circe's voice still echoes in your head measured.com, telling you how to prepare for the land where the living and the dead briefly share the same breath. The crew doesn't ask questions. They've learned that some destinations are better approached with silence, as if talking about them too soon might convince the fates to move them closer. Days pass, the wind thinning, the nights stretching. You catch sight of birds you've never seen before, long-winged dark, their cries low and human-like. Historians still argue whether Homer was describing real migratory species or using them as omens for the underworld crossing. Either way, their presence makes the men's hands tighten on their oars. The air changes again, cooler, sharper, and carrying the smell of wet stone. You steer toward a dim coastline where the sky never seems to fully brighten, even at midday. This is the edge of Oceanus, the great river that encircles the world in the old stories. A place where the map runs out and the imagination takes over. The waves lap slower here, like they've forgotten the rhythm of the open sea. Circe's instructions replay in your mind. Beach the ship. Dig a trench as long and wide as a man's forearm. Pour libations of milk and honey, sweet wine and water. Then sprinkle barley, and promise the dead that you'll sacrifice a black ram when you return home payment for their guidance. The crew works quickly, glancing over their shoulders at the shadowed hills beyond. You light the fire, its smoke curling against the damp air, and call to the shades in a voice you barely recognize as your own. And they come. At first it's just a change in the air cold that seeps into your joints. Then shapes begin to gather at the edge of the firelight, pale faces hollow-eyed, their outlines flickering like reflections in disturbed water. You hold them back with your sword until the one you're waiting for appears. Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes, still crowned with a garland that somehow hasn't wilted. He drinks from the trench and speaks in a voice like leaves scraping across stone. He tells you that Poseidon's anger will not fade, that you'll be tested at every turn, and that when you finally reach Ithaca, more trials will wait in your own hall. He warns you of the sun god's cattle touch them, and doom follows. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some ancient traditions, heroes visiting the underworld had to cover themselves in blood or ash to be seen by the dead, a detail Homer skips, but later poets loved for its drama. You want to ask more about Penelope, Telemachus? How much longer this will take, but the shades press in, each one desperate to drink and speak. Among them is your mother. You didn't even know she was dead. Her face is calm, but her words cut deep. She tells you of Ithaca, troubles of Penelope's suitors, of Telemachus growing into a man without you. The firelight shakes in your vision, though your hand stays steady on the sword. Other shades come Agamemnon, warning of treachery at home. Achilles, admitting that life, even as a nobody, is worth more than being a king among the dead. You nod, though the meaning will take time to settle. Historians still debate whether this underworld scene reflects genuine Bronze Age beliefs, or later, more poetic ideas about death and the soul. Standing here, breath clouding in the cold, the argument feels irrelevant. Whatever this is, it's real enough for you. When the last words are spoken, you pour one final libation, sealing the promise of sacrifice, and step back toward the ship. The shades linger at the edge of the dark, watching until the oars bite into water again. You don't look back. The men row without speaking, their faces pale in the dim light. The air slowly warms, but the weight of that place clings to you. Circe's next warnings stir in your mind, sirens ahead, and worse. The dead have given you a map of dangers. It's your job to survive them. The sea breathes easier once you've put the underworld behind you, but the taste of it still clings like smoke in your clothes after a fire. The men row in silence, as though loud voices might tempt something from below to follow. You keep your eyes forward, scanning the horizon for any sign of the next trap Circe warned you about, the sirens. The air grows warmer. The swell under the ship turns lazy, almost coaxing. You spot a chain of low rocks ahead, washed in sunlight, gulls circling high above. Nothing threatening, at least. Not if you didn't know better. That's the trick with the sirens. They don't look dangerous from a distance. They just sound that way. Historians still argue whether the sirens were ever meant to be half-bird, half-woman as later art depicts them, or whether Homer's audience imagined them as entirely human in form, just unnervingly perfect in their beauty. Either way, their power is in the voice, not the shape. Circe's advice is still fresh. Melt beeswax, plug the ears of every man on board. You make the men line up, shoving the warm wax into each ear yourself, ignoring the grumbles. You'll thank me when you're alive. You tell them, though they can't hear you now. But for yourself, you choose another path. Curiosity is a stubborn thing, and you want to hear them to know what could pull a man from his own ship into the sea. So you order the men to lash you to the mast. Rope coils around your chest, arms, and legs until you can barely shift your weight. No matter what I say, no matter what I promise. You keep rowing, you tell them, shouting so they might catch the gist. The ship slides closer. At first, There's only the regular slap of waves against the hull. Then the air shifts, thickens like honey warmed by the sun. A sound brushes the edge of your hearing, so delicate you almost think it's the wind through the rigging. But it grows, note by note, until it's not sound at all, but a feeling warmth. Familiarity, the exact shape of longing you didn't know you still carried. They're singing to you, not just to sailors in general, but in words that curl perfectly into your own thoughts. They speak of Ithaca, of the smell of Penelope's hair, of Telemachus running to meet you on the shore. They tell you they know everything you've done, every choice, every burden, and that all of it can end here, in peace, without more storms or monsters. You strain against the ropes, the fibers biting into your skin. You shout to the men orders. Please, you're not sure which, but they can't hear you. You promise gold, freedom, anything if they'll steer toward the rocks. The voices swell, each note a perfect thread in a net you didn't notice closing until it's nearly shut. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some versions of the myth, the sirens had to die if any man heard their song and survived, which means you're not just resisting, you're killing them by doing so. That thought almost makes you pity them. Almost. The ship inches past the rocks, the voices rising to a desperate pitch, then breaking suddenly, like a snapped string. The silence that follows is jarring thin. The gulls wheel above again, just birds now. You sag against the mast, the ropes slick with your sweat. The men pull the wax from their ears once you're well clear. They look to you for the story, but you say nothing. Not yet. Some things are better carried alone, at least for a while. Historians still debate whether the siren's danger was meant as a metaphor for temptation, for the way longing can steer a man off his course. You can't say for certain. You just know the memory of their voices will follow you for the rest of the voyage. A perfect echo waiting in the back of your mind. You untie yourself, stretch your stiff arms, and take the tiller again. Ahead lies a narrower strait, where Circe's warning comes back with teeth. Scylla on one side, Charybdis on the other. The sirens are behind you, but the sea is far from finished. The horizon pinches itself into a narrow seam, to cliffs rising like bookends on either side. Even at this distance, you can see the restless churn of white water between them. This is the passage Circe described with the kind of seriousness people reserve for warnings about fire. Scylla on one side, Charybdis on the other. Scylla first. She lives in a high dark cleft in the cliff to starboard, her cavern mouth shadowed like an open throat. Circe said she has 12 legs, 6 long necks, and a head at the end of each, though whether that's literal or just a poet's way of saying you will not like what comes out of there. Historians still argue. What's certain is that she strikes without warning, snatching sailors off the deck and swallowing them whole. Then Charybdis, to port. She's less a creature than a force, a whirlpool so massive it swallows the sea itself 3 times a day. When she drinks, the water hisses and drops away, dragging anything nearby into her dark, crushing gut. When she spits it back, it's with enough force to smash a ship like driftwood. Circe's advice was cruel in its precision. Steer closer to Scylla. You might lose 6 men, but with Charybdis, you lose everyone. You explain this to the crew in the flattest voice you can manage, leaving out the part where Circe admitted there's no real way to fight Scylla at all. They nod grimly, tightening the rigging, checking the oars, each man avoiding the other's eyes. You steer right, letting the portside edge just far enough away from Charybdis's pull that you can still feel it in your bones, a low, sucking hum that vibrates the hull. The cliffs close in, spray lashes your face. To port, you see the water bulge and swirl, the center darkening as if the sea is peeling itself open. The ship lists slightly toward it, and the men on that side lean back in unison, as though their weight could tip the balance. Then, from the starboard cliff, something moves, fast. A blur of pale necks, snapping jaws, teeth curved like fishhooks. 6 heads dart from the gloom, each one locking onto a target. You have no time to shout before they're gone again, retreating into the dark with 6 screaming men clamped in their jaws. You can't turn back. You can't even slow down. The rest of the crew rows harder, the oars groaning under the strain. You stare at the water ahead, pretending you don't hear the crunch of bones echoing from the cliff. Here's your quirky tidbit. Ancient mariners sometimes tossed animal carcasses overboard in narrow, dangerous passes, hoping to distract whatever unseen predators lurked there. You have no such offering, only the hope that Scylla's hunger is momentarily satisfied. The ship bursts out of the strait into calmer water. The cliffs fall behind, and the wind seems to sigh in relief. The surviving crew slump where they sit, some staring at the empty benches where friends were just moments ago. You keep your eyes forward, because looking back changes nothing. Historians still debate whether Scylla and Charybdis were based on real maritime hazards, hidden reefs, and whirlpools, or whether they were pure allegory for the impossible choices sailors face. But when you've watched 6 lives vanish in the space of a heartbeat, the metaphor doesn't matter. The men patch the sails, reset the lines, and move in near silence for the rest of the day. The sun dips, painting the waves in gold, but the beauty feels undeserved. You grip the tiller tighter, because ahead waits another of Circe's warnings, the island of the sun god's cattle. And after what just happened, you know how thin the line is between a safe harbor and a final resting place. The sea settles into a long, even roll, the kind that tempts you to think the worst is behind you. You know better. Circe's warning about the sun god's cattle has been circling in your head since the moment you left her island. Do not touch them. Do not kill them. Do not even think about eating them. The men, however, are fraying. Scylla took more than Livesey, took whatever thin thread of faith they had left that you can get them home. Supplies are low. The salted fish is nearly gone, the wineskins light. When an island appears on the horizon, soft green hills, bright streams, pastures striped with grazing animals, it looks like salvation. You know it's temptation. As you draw closer, you see them, cattle, sleek and golden in the sunlight, their hides almost glowing, horns curved like crescents of ivory. No herdsman tends them, but the way they stand calm, unafraid, makes it clear they belong to someone, and not just anyone. Helios, the sun god himself. Historians still argue whether this part of the story reflects an actual sacred herd from a real island cult, or whether it's a pure narrative device to test obedience. Either way, the rules are clear. Harm even one, and the gods will take their price. You order the men to stay on the ship, to ration what's left, to avoid the shore entirely. But a sudden wind drives you into the harbor, whether you want it or not, and dark clouds crowd the horizon. By the time you anchor, rain is hissing on the deck. The storm doesn't leave the next day, or the one after. Days stretch into weeks, the wind howling from the same direction, pinning you here like an insect in amber. The men grow restless. Hunger twists their bellies, and the sight of the cattle grazing so calmly on the hills gnaws at them. You repeat Circe's warning, Tiresias' prophecy, every scrap of divine threat you've been handed. They nod and agree until you fall asleep one night to the sound of distant lowing and the crack of an axe. When you wake, the smell hits you first, roasting meat. You stumble to the shore to find them gathered around a fire, strips of golden hide curling in the flames, fat hissing and spitting. Eurylochus, your second in command, meets your eyes without shame. Better to die full than starve to death, he says. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some ancient cultures believed eating the flesh of sacred animals could grant divine power if you survived the god's wrath afterward. That if has never felt heavier. The storm breaks the day after the feast, the sea suddenly calm, the sky painfully blue. You set sail in silence, the smell of cooked meat still lingering in the timbers. By midday, the first omen appears. The hides of the slaughtered cattle begin to crawl and twitch on the deck, moving as though the bones have returned to them. The men back away, whispering prayers. Then, as the sun sets, a low hum builds in the air. The sky darkens unnaturally fast. Thunder cracks so loud it feels like it's splitting the world in half. You look up just in time to see Zeus's lightning spear down from the clouds, striking the mast and shattering it to splinters. The ship lurches, planks bursting, the sea pouring in. You cling to the remains of the mast as the men vanish, pulled under in the roar and foam. The storm swallows everything, ship, crew, the very sound of your own voice, till there is only you. Drifting alone on a scrap of timber, historians still debate whether the sun god's wrath was meant as a warning about piety, discipline, or simply respecting boundaries. Out here, it feels like all three. The sea takes you in its arms again, this time with no promise of bringing you back. Somewhere ahead lies whatever comes next. You can't see land, you can barely see the stars, but you hold to the driftwood and keep your face above the water, because even in the god's anger, you're not done yet. The sea has a strange quiet after the rage of Zeus's storm, like a predator catching its breath. You drift on the shattered mast, your skin tight with salt, lips cracked, body swaying with each slow pulse of the swell. The stars return, sharp and cold above you, and you use them the way your ancestors did, measuring the tilt of the constellations to guess which way the current is carrying you. Not that it matters much without oars or sail. The next day brings a new sound, the hiss of water drawn down, a deep gurgling churn that makes the driftwood tremble under you. You don't need to see it to know Charybdis again. You've been pushed back toward her, that vast whirlpool with the appetite of a god. You cling harder to the mast as the sea rises and falls in massive breaths. The center of the whirlpool opens like a dark throat, swallowing the surface in a spiraling rush. The mast tilts toward it, ropes trailing into the dark. The pull is almost gentle at first, like being invited in. Then it sharpens, tugging with a strength that would tear you from the wood if you weren't lashed to it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Sailors in the ancient world often explained whirlpools as the work of submerged monsters, but there's evidence. Some of these hazards were actually caused by underwater volcanic activity. Knowing that doesn't make them less terrifying. It just adds lava to the list of things that can kill you. You time your breaths, waiting for the moment when Charybdis begins to vomit the sea back out. When the swell rises, you kick free of the mast, swimming for the jagged shadows of the cliffside. Your fingers find a narrow fig tree growing from the rock, a lonely wind-bent thing that somehow has roots in stone. You cling to it while the water thunders and froths below. The whirlpool collapses on itself with a final hiss. The current easing, you drop back into the water, kicking toward a strip of calmer waves beyond the danger. By some twist of fate, maybe Athena's quiet hand, you reach open water again, lungs burning, arms leaden. Days blur together after that. The sun burns by day, the stars spin by night, and the only sound is the slap of water against your drifting scrap of timber. You've stopped feeling hunger. Thirst is the sharper knife now. You dream of Penelope's voice, Telemachus's face, the smell of home fires. Each time you wake, the ocean is still there, endless and indifferent. And then land, a low rim of green against the horizon, growing with each slow drift. The waves nudge you toward it, almost kindly. When the breakers finally catch you, they roll you onto a beach of pale sand. You lie there a long time, feeling the solid earth under you, not trusting it to stay. When you finally sit up, you see the island is lush palms, flowering vines, streams spilling down from high hills. It could be paradise if you weren't alone. You haul yourself into the shade and let sleep take you, the sand warm beneath your back, the sound of the surf almost like a lullaby. Historians still argue whether Odysseus's drift here was meant to be literal or symbolic, a rebirth after destruction. For you, lying on that beach, it feels like neither. It feels like a pause, a single page between two very different chapters. When you wake again, you realize you're not alone after all. A figure is watching you from the tree line, tall and radiant in a way no mortal ever is. You've seen enough gods to know one when they're standing in front of you. This one smiles slow, assessing, and steps forward. You've just washed up in Calypso's realm, and your Odyssey is far from over. The figure steps into full light, and you see her more clearly, tall, with hair the color of sun-warmed chestnuts, and eyes that seem to hold a depth you can't quite name. She wears no crown, yet the air around her feels claimed, as if the entire island bends toward her in quiet allegiance. This is Calypso, daughter of Atlas, and though you don't know it, yet your new jailer, dressed in hospitality. She moves with the calm of someone who has never been hurried in her life. "You are far from home," she says, not as a question, but as a statement already woven into her knowledge. She doesn't ask your name. She tells you it, perfectly pronounced, and smiles when you startle. "Come," she adds. "You will not die here, not unless you wish it." The island Odysseus, as much a character as she is. The air smells of cedar and citrus. The grass under your feet is springy and cool, and streams hum over stones into clear pools, deep enough to swim in. Birds flash between branches heavy with fruit, and every breeze seems to carry the exact temperature your skin wanted before it knew to ask. Historians still argue whether Ogygia was based on a real Mediterranean island or purely Homer's invention, but the details divine's heavy with grapes. The tall stands of alder and cypress are vivid enough to make it feel like a place that could still be hiding out there. Calypso tends to your wounds without fuss, her hands sure and unhurried. She brings you bread still warm from her ovens, fish seasoned with herbs you don't recognize, and wine sweet enough to soften the salt in your throat. And she talks not the quick chatter of mortals, but the slow unfolding of stories from someone who has centuries to tell them. She speaks of her father holding the pillars of the world, of storms that have raged for decades, of sailors who never reached her shore because the gods had other plans. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some later traditions, Calypso's name is linked to the Greek word kalypto, meaning to conceal or to hide, which makes sense. This island is not on any map, and once you're here, the outside world feels like something you dreamed. Days pass in a haze of comfort. She offers you a bargain stay here, and she will make you immortal. No storms, no hunger, no aging. The words slide into your mind like warm water into cool sand. Part of you wants to say yes, to lay down the endless strain of captaining and fighting and losing. But when you picture it, you see Penelope's face, Telemachus's unshaven jaw, the hearth in Ithaca that no other fire will replace. Immortality without them is just a long, slow forgetting. You tell her you must go home. She tilts her head, not offended but quietly sad, as if she's heard this before and knows how it ends. Still, she doesn't let you leave, not yet. She keeps you in Ogygia with gifts of food and music and long warm nights where the stars seem closer than anywhere else you've sailed. Weeks turn into months. Months blur into years. Historians still debate how long you stayed. Some say 7 years. Others shorten it to less than 1, but the feeling is the same. Time here is not a straight road. It loops, curls, and doubles back on itself until you can't tell whether the tide has just turned or turned 100 times. Every so often, you climb the highest hill and look out across the water, scanning for sails. You never see any. The sea is flawless and empty, a mirror you can't break, and still, you keep looking. Then, one morning, a different wind comes to Ogygia, not from the sea, but from the direction of Olympus. Calypso feels it too. She doesn't say anything, but her hands are slower as she lays the bread on the table. That night she walks the shoreline alone, and when she returns, she tells you the truth. Hermes has come, carrying a message from Zeus himself. The gods have decided it's time to let you go. Her voice is even, but her eyes are not. You understand now. She could keep you here forever, if she fought for it. But she won't. The bargain is broken, not by you, but by something older and heavier than both of you. Tomorrow, she says, you will build a raft. You spend the morning turning trees into a plan. Calypso shows you where the alder grows straight and the cypress bends without breaking. You measure with your forearm, cut with stone blades that bite more slowly than you'd like, and lash the logs with plaited cords. It's not a ship, it's optimistic carpentry. Still, by late afternoon, the raft floats in her cove, a square of lashed trunks with a little mast, a stitched sail, and rails high enough to pretend you won't get washed off. Calypso stalks it like a fussy ant, amphorae of water, baskets of bread and roasted fish, a skin of wine that smells like afternoon sunlight. She even gives you a good cloak and says, very softly, that she hopes you won't need it long. You push off under a sky as clean as new bronze, for 17 days. The sea behaves like it's auditioning for best supporting calm. You read the constellations the way you read faces, keeping the Pleiades just so. Orion's shoulder here, the bears circling without ever dipping into ocean, little anchors, hammered into night. Historical sidebar, to keep your inner nerd cozy. Those star names go back a very long way, by the late Bronze Age. Sailors from the Aegean to the Levant were navigating by the same familiar patterns you're squinting at now. It's one of the oldest group projects humanity ever agreed on. On the 18th day, the sea remembers you have enemies. Poseidon is sailing back from a feast with the Ethiopians, in a mood, and spots your hopeful rectangle bobbing along like an insult he can fix. The horizon darkens like ink spilled from a god's inkwell. Wind knuckles your sail. The first wave hits sideways, tossing you so hard your stomach forgets directions. You cut the mast free before it spears you. The raft rises and drops, rises and drops, each fall a trap door. You think of bags of wind, sacred cattle, and every time you almost made it and didn't. Consider this your reality check's sequel. You wouldn't survive this without a miracle and exactly 2 good decisions. One of them arrives wearing a gull skims the wave and becomes a woman, a flash of white and salt and kindness. Ino, she says, voice like surf over pebbles. She tosses you a scarf. Yes, okay, a divine veil. But it looks like a scarf, and we're keeping this cozy, telling you to tie it round your chest and abandon the raft. Swim, she adds, with all the breezy confidence of someone who does not have lungs. You wait for a break between the waves, not the cloth, and dive. The raft somersaults away like a clumsy whale, and comes apart, cheerful as kindling. Poseidon hammers the sea out of pure principle. Ino's veil buoys you up every time his temper drags you down. You fight water for 2 days, which is roughly forever measured in salt. When your arms go from lead to smoke, you spot an island, a pale blur of cliffs with the green hint of trees beyond. The surf along the outer shore is a stone mill, merciless. You angle toward a river mouth, where the foam breaks and the current threads gentler. The river accepts you like a doorman who's seen worse, and you crawl onto a bar of reed and sand, coughing up ocean and vows you can't keep. You return the veil, as instructed, tossing it back where the water gathers itself into glass. It skims away like a blessing that never needed thanks. You collapse under a thicket of oleander and sleep. The hard sleep of people who've done math with death and come out +1. Morning finds you stiff, bruised, and aware that you are, to put it delicately, underdressed for networking. You weave a girdle of leaves, fig, mostly, because fig trees are the unofficial brand partners of Odyssey and Survivaland. Follow the river inland, hoping for people not currently in the mood to throw boulders. Voices reach you first, young, bright, braided together with laughter. A group of girls are on the riverbank with a cart and a pile of linen, smacking clothes against flat stones and playing catch with a ball while the fabric dries. It's the kind of domestic scene bards never linger on. but Homer does. Like a director who knows quiet is what makes the loud parts land. The tallest girl moves like someone who's been told her whole life to stand up straight and has decided to mean it. Nausicaa, daughter of King Alcinous. Athena has visited her in a dream. Gods slide into deems a lot in your world, nudging her. Here at the exact hour, a salt-crusted stranger crawls from the reeds. You consider your options. Approach like a wild man and send everyone sprinting, or keep distance. Speak carefully. Use the honeyed script of guest right. You pick the second. Cover yourself with the leaf girdle's dignity low, but non-zero, and step into the light. The maids scatter. Nausicaa does not. You praise her good sense before her beauty vital ordering. 10/10 recommend, ask for aid, that won't cost her honor. She listens with the alert kindness of someone who thinks feelings are data, then gestures to a bundle of clothing and a flask of oil. Wash, eat, rest, she says, then come to town later. Not with me. People talk. But if you ask for my mother, Queen Arete, and take her knees, all will be well. Quirky tidbit, while you towel off with borrowed decency. Ancient laundry was basically a chemistry set with ash for alkali, clay to pull out grease, stomping and beating and river-rinsing. Your own cloak, once oiled, doubles as the Bronze Age's version of SPF. Athletes really did slather themselves in olive oil and scrape it off with a strigil. No, not crocodile dung sunscreen. That's Egyptian, and we are not doing that again. You follow Nausicaa's wagon tracks to a city that's more orchard than fortress broad streets. Sleek ships drawn up like chariots, gardens where vines climb trained and disciplined as soldiers. The Phaeacians of Scheria historians still argue whether this is mythic nowhere. Later Corfu, or a memory of seafaring Minoans or Phoenicians, don't look like fighters. They look like the kind of people who race each other for fun after dinner and build ships that move as if they're thinking. Some say their hulls steer by mind alone. Some say that's just what good pilots do when they don't narrate every motion. Inside the palace, light multiplies, bronze doors gleam. Columns catch the afternoon, and the smell of bread and cedar rides the air. You do as advised. Go straight to Arete. You kneel, hands on her knees in that formal, ancient gesture that makes a promise both ways. I come as supplicant, you answer as host. Xenia, the guest friendship contract, is older than half the gods. Grudges, and twice as binding. Mainstream fact check while your heart hammers. Greek society really did treat hospitality as sacred. Zeus Sinios watched over it, and breaking it was the social equivalent of kicking the universe's puppy. Alcinous asks your name. Arete asks about your cloak. Hers. She recognizes her own weave. You parry without lying, thank without bragging, and accept the chair, the bath, the feast. A bard named Demodocus comes in, his sight turned inward, his voice turned outward, and sings about Troy, the wooden horse, the night of fire, the trick that ended a war. You're fine, absolutely fine, except you're crying into your cloak, with the muscle memory of men who don't cry in public. Alcinous sees, and, because he is good at people, changes the program from trauma playlist to games, foot races, discus, a little friendly ego management. Someone pokes at you to join. You demur, then demonstrate, landing a discus throw that says, in a relaxed ASMR cadence, please don't. Joke 1. Your PR team would call that controlling the narrative with limited resources and great core strength. After dinner, you ask for the floor. Not the whole floor, just enough to lay your story end to end, so the room can step carefully across it. You thank the queen, salute the king, praise Demodocus, tip your artists, and then you do the thing you do best after living. You tell it. Like a traveling podcaster with a 10-episode arc, you start at the beginning. Not the beginning, but the moment right after Troy when the sea changed its mind about you. You paint islands with voice, sketch monsters in the negative. Space of silence, braid in the smells lotus, sheep cheese, Circe's cedar smoke, underworld cold, siren honey in till the room leans closer. Joke 2. Feathersoft. You promise no mid-roll ads. Then quietly thank Hermes for prior sponsorships and herb safety. You don't embellish the losses. You don't sand down the edges, either. You let the pauses do some of the work. When you reach the bit with the sacred cattle, you look directly at the fire instead of faces. When the lightning hits, the log pops like a stage cue. Somewhere between Scylla's jaws and Calypso's offer, the hall forgets to sip their wine. The kids near the back sit cross-legged, the way kids always have when stories make tomorrow feel further away, in a good way. Historians still argue whether the Phaeacians were Homer's ideal audience, generous, skilled, slightly otherworldly, a polite dig at real islanders who ferried myths across the sea. You only know that when you finish speaking. The hush is the kind that heals all stands. We'll see you home, he says, as if that's as simple as fetching a cloak. Arete smiles a yes that carries the house with it. Somewhere outside, the Phaeacian shipwrights are likely already checking a hull, running hands along planks, like harpists tuning an instrument. You let your shoulders drop the least little bit. Tonight, you sleep on linen that breathes, and a mattress that remembers your shape. Tomorrow, you might finally stop measuring hope in inches. Joke 3. Tucked into the pillow. If these folks ever launch a startup, it'll be called Home in One Night, and you'll be their most emotional 5-star review. The lamps are trimmed. The bard hums, something low, wordless, kind. You close your eyes and hear not thunder, but the far-off gossip of a harbor that already knows your name. Morning folds open like fresh linen, and the palace hums with that bright, purposeful noise people make when a plan is already halfway done. Alcinous has summoned the elders. Arete has ordered a chest. Nausicaa, wise about rumors and optics, keeps her distance, but sends a look that says go well, and do not waste this. You bathe of oil, warm water, strigil. The whole spa routine that would make a modern Jim Jellison step into a hall, stacked with gifts. Bronze tripods, hammered bowls, cloaks fine enough to whisper, and a heavy, handsome sword with a grip that fits your hand like a remembered handshake. Guest friendship has its receipts, and the Phaeacians keep books. Arete brings out a sea blue chest, and does something only a queen who has folded a lifetime's worth of cloth would think to do. She personally packs your treasures so nothing rattles, nothing scuffs, everything arrives. Then she nods the lid with a trick twist of cord that sailors use when they're serious about do not open until home. You feel the knot in your chest mirror, the one on the chest. This time you're guarding wealth, not winds. Lesson learned. Demodocus sings a farewell tune soft. Sailing Timpu, and the city flows toward the harbor. The Phaeacian ship waits in a cradle of clear water, sleek as a seal, and somehow both delicate and strong. You've seen hundreds of hulls, but this one feels attentive. The timbers are oiled to a glow, the oars a matched chorus line, fringed tidbit to stash behind your ear. Later, lore insists, Phaeacian ships, steered by thought, reading a helmsman's mind like a breeze, reads the surface of the sea. You don't fully buy it, but when you touch the prow, it shivers the way a horse does when it recognizes the hand that will ride it well. Before you board, Alcinous speaks the old words under the open sky, invoking Zeus, Xenios protector of guests and hosts. Sand promises a passage without delay, without stops, without just one more island for snacks. A mainstream historical anchor while the foam lifts. The sanctity of Xenia wasn't just mythicate patterned real Mediterranean. Diplomacy, hospitality forged alliances that outlived kings, and a gift recorded in one port could earn help in another a generation later. People remembered who fed whom. The line is cast off. The city pulls away like a dream, deciding to be memory. Oars dip and rise, the cadence so perfect it disappears like breath when you're not thinking about it. Sailcloth unfurls with a sigh, drinks the wind, and the prow writes its clean line across a perfectly readable page. Someone brings bread, figs, and a cup. Someone else tucks a second cloak beneath your head with the casual tenderness of family. Sleep, Arete had said, and the ship seems to agree, rocking you with the professionalism of a cradle that's seen some things. You lie back among your gifts, yes. The closed chest stand watch the mast etch the sky. A gull paces you for a while, then peels off. Clouds build like soft mountains and melt again. Voices thin, oars fold. The ship has slipped into that uncanny glide where there's no splash, no creak, only forward. Joke 1, whispered with a smile. If Uber ran boats like this, 5 stars would feel stingy. You dream not the twitchy kind, but the deep, generous sort where time stops counting. In it, the map unrolls and folds itself into a single line that goes from a smoking city to a door you have closed 1,000 times in your mind so you can open it now. You see Penelope's loom, the shuttle pausing mid-flight. You see Telemachus, taller than your shoulder. You see olive roots grappling the earth the way promises grip the spine. The ship keeps its counsel and keeps its course. When your eyes open, the sea smells different. Thyme and goat and hearth smoke braided into salt. Morning drizzles gold over a coastline you could draw blindfolded, jagged, where the cliffs shoulder into surf, gentled by coves that keep secrets. The Phaeacians do not wake you. They ease into a shadowed inlet beneath a hill tufted with olive trees and run the hull up soft, like a hand setting a sleeping child into bed and not daring the noisy hinge. They carry you ashore, set you on the sand, tuck your cloak higher, and stack the chest at your side. No speeches, no selfies, just work done right. They push off before the town can see, because history has a way of arguing about generosity when gods start noticing. Historians still argue whether Scheria was Corfu, someplace further west, or a nowhere made of wish and water. They also still argue whether the stone ship off Paleokastritsa is anything but limestone that happens to look like a hole. Poseidon, however, does not argue, he acts. He spots the returning crew, remembers a sun with one eye and a name shouted across water, and decides to make a point. The Phaeacian vessel rises proud on the swell just outside their harbor, then hardens mid-motion keel to figurehead into stone. A gray ship, forever on the verge of arriving. Now, a warning bell without a sound. Alcinous, feeling the god's hand in his trade, vows to draw back the gift, no more ferrying strangers across the world. Generosity closes like a shell. The sea is a little lonelier for it. On the beach, you stir and don't recognize the cove. At first, because waking in safety is a new sensation and the brain likes to lag a beat when good things happen. Then the olive shade slants just so. A bee does that Ithacan looped loop, and your heart does the thing hearts do when they arrive before the rest of you. Joke too soft and homey. Your island has the decency to smell exactly like your memories, which is rare in travel and rarer in reunions. You check the chest unopened, cords still clean, and do something past you would have framed as character development. You hide the treasure before you go anywhere. You find a cave the locals call Forces Play School, shelved, with ledges like natural shelves, and stow the gifts where even a curious goat would need a map and a step stool. You lay hands on the knots and smile at Arete's packing logic. Nothing has shifted, nothing bruised. Everything ready for a household that will need both beauty and barter when you put your name back into its doorway. Standing in the olive shade, you take stock, the way sailors do in new harbors. You are home, yes, but home is not empty. Suitors swarm your hall like wasps. Your son is grown into decision. Your wife has been threading survival, one weft at a time. This next passage will not need oars. It will need patience, masks, and a kind of courage that doesn't shout. The beach holds its breath. A traveler approaches cloaked, youthful, bright-souled who isn't youthful at all. Athena. She tilts her head, takes in your salt and scars, and the brand new steadiness in your shoulders, and smiles like a teacher. Who sees the answer rise slow and correct? Mainstream fact checkpoint while she works a disguise around you like mist. In Homeric society, recognition scenes are ritual arts, tokens, scars, shared memories used like keys. You'll need all of them soon, and you'll need time. Athena dusts your hair with gray, shrinks your stance, lines your hands with honest labor. You become less visible and more dangerous, which is, to be fair, your brand. Joke 3. Tucked under the new cloak. The last time you tried undercover, it involved calling yourself nobody. This time, try not to yell your real name across a courtyard. The ship that brought you has vanished into stone somewhere far away. The beach has swallowed your footprints, as beaches do. The chest sleeps in rock's cool throat. You shoulder a beggar's stick that weighs less than restraint. Turn your face inland, and listen to how the island talks when no one is watching. Alavlees gossiping, goats arguing union rules, a brook retelling the same joke it never tires of. The path climbs toward pigs and a friend who kept faith. Every step feels like a line clicking back into place after being bent too long. The voyage that finally went to plan has delivered you not to an ending, but to the narrow door of the last necessary work. Athena's disguise settles on you like a dusk that decides to stay for winter hair frosted, skin sunned into rough leather, clothes with the complicated dignity of poverty. You test the weight of the walking stick she hands you. It's light, but the story it tells is heavy enough to open doors or close them. You won't be recognized, she says, which is exactly the kind of sentence that turns a homecoming into reconnaissance. The beach behind you smells like salt and driftwood. Ahead, a goat path corkscrews uphill, lined with thyme and the silver murmurs of olive leaves. Your feet remember this dust before your eyes, accept the view, Ithaca. But home behaves like a shy animal. It doesn't rush you. It lets you approach sideways. The olive groves are exactly where you left them, and also not the saplings you planted, are grown into real shade. And the old knotty trees, where they're aged like a badge. A shepherd you don't know crosses a ridge with dogs that bark in a dialect. You half recognize, glance at your rags, then lose interest. You pass a terrace wall with a gap you swear you meant to fix the year of the good barley. Someone else has stacked a neat triangle of new stones there. Your island has been taking care of itself in your absence. Mostly. Athena keeps pace in the form of a quick-eyed youth. No one bothers to greet, because youth are invisible, unless they're up to something. She talks while you walk, pointing with her chin, the way locals do. Suitors, she says. 100 mouths, chewing your stores, stamping their muddy sandals on your thresholds, rearranging your household into a lounge with complimentary wine and rampant entitlement. You picture your great hall, the smoke-blackened rafters, the long benches, the hearth that remembers the exact sound of your boots and, then the overlay. Strange men laughing, snapping fingers for more meat, yawning through the old songs. Your jaw tightens. But the disguise insists on patience. Mainstream anchor, while you lean into the staff. Homeric households really did turn around the principle of oikos, the household as economy, temple, family, and farm all braided together. In your world, a hall is not just a dining room. It's a bank, a courthouse, a memory palace. 100 suitors eating there isn't a party. It's a slow-motion seizure. You crest a hill and see the town like you've never seen it, as surveillance, not nostalgia. Rooflines step down toward the harbor, smoke skates sideways on the wind, and there's that bright whiteness of newly scrubbed linen flapping from a line somebody's wedding cloth or somebody's wish. The road into town has grown busier in 10 years. Cart ruts cut deep. A potter has set up a stall where you once saw a shepherd swap a lamb for a drinking cup. A boy runs past you with a hoop made of willow. He glances at your face, misreads your age as safety, and grins. Your heart hits the brakes, then takes one cautious step forward. You don't go straight home. Athena won't let you. Information. before heroics, she says, which is practical, if rude to your adrenaline. She steers you toward a watering place, where old men collect like pigeons on a square, benches, a spring, the eternal topic of other people's business. You sit, pretending to nap, and let talk wash over you. The price of salt fish. A boat half-wrecked on the shoals. The rumor that Telemachus sailed east with no permission but plenty of purpose. The deeper rumor that Penelope has finally promised to choose a husband. You breathe through that. Your disguise has opinions, but it does not have the right to interrupt. Here's your quirky tidbit. More than one ancient source claims that beggars in the old days were walking newsletters, gossip for bread, carrying messages tucked under ragged hems, even acting as ad hoc spies. A good ruse takes its cover story seriously. You nod, grumble about sore feet, and barter a rumor from the other side of the island for a slice of coarse loaf. You're not above eating the crumbs of your own table, if it buys you one more useful sentence. When the sun tilts, you head toward the outskirts rather than the center, because the path to retaking a house does not begin at its front door. Athena points you down a track that wanders between pig runs and beehives, past a patch of wild fennel that has annexed the ditch. In a fragrant coo, a pair of ravens follow, hopping ahead and scolding, the way birds do when they've decided your interest in. Historians still argue whether Homer's birds are just birds or feathered footnotes from the gods. Either way, they mark your pace like punctuation marks. The land itself speaks in small dialects you never forgot. You never forgot. You know where the ground will give underfoot because of an old burrow, where the spring will run, even in a hard summer, because of the depth of the rock. You pass the field where Telemachus learned to throw a spear at a tree because you didn't trust him with a moving target yet. You pass the low stone where you once napped and woke with a bee, exploring your ear like a diplomat with an agenda. Each turn of the road is a recognition scene without an audience. Joke 1. Whispered to the olive roots. It turns out the most advanced home security system is simply leaving for 20 years and recognizing every snag of the path anyway. Down in a hollow, you pause where the wind carries up a scent that needs no translation. Pigs. Rich, warm, faintly comic. A pen sprawls insensible chaos fence, mended with whatever was long and wooden, troughs chewed into scallops by impatient mouths. The ground packed into glossy earth by 100 blunt hooves. A swarm of piglets streaks past like errant punctuation. You are very close to the man you're not allowed to greet yet. Athena stops. You with a hand that feels like a breeze changing its mind. 2 more things, she says. 1. Don't test your wife tonight. Don't even dream of it. She's been tested every day you were gone. You nod, and the nod rearranges your ribs a little. 2. Say less than you know to everyone. But me. You can't unsay a name. You practice silence by practicing breath. Inhale past the onion temps of the cookfire smoke. Exhale the habit of command. You are still captain, but the ship is a household now, and the oars pull in different ways. From this hillside you can see the road to your hall. Men drift along it in 2s and 3s, dressed finer than their fathers could afford, laughing with the laughs of people who don't have to earn tomorrow's bread. One of them peels off to spit in the dust near a beggar with a bowl. The beggar looks down, then sideways, the way people look when dignity keeps them from breaking a bowl over a skull. Your fingers flex once on the staff. You do not move. Mainstream. Historical pause. Greek guests could demand hospitality by custom, but beggars depended on pity and piety. Both were supposed to be plentiful, when they weren't. It meant a household's roof beams were already cracked in the places you can't see. Athena gives you a last look over, tugging your shoulder forward, scuffing the hem of your cloak, nudging your voice a half-tone down, into the gravel of someone who has slept outdoors more often than in. You are about to be underestimated, she says. Please do not waste this gift. Joke 2, soft as a goat's sigh. Being underestimated pairs beautifully with being over-prepared, chef's kiss. Truly, you take the long way around the grove, because walking straight into a reunion is a good way to start crying or fighting, and tonight calls for neither. A hedgehog mutters under bracken like a tiny disapproving uncle. The light thins into that honey color that makes stones remember golden ages. A hawk writes a sentence across the upper blue and dots it with a mouse. You try not to think about too much. At the edge of the pig farm clearing. You stop. The hut is sturdy in the way of structures that plan to survive weather and worry. Rush thatch, thick as a boar's back. Walls of wattle and daub, patched by hands that know where rain sneaks in. A threshold worn into a shine by boots that did the work. Wood smoke pours confidence from the roof hole. A dog lifts its head, locks onto your scent, and decides this is a bark that can wait until closer. You set the staff under your arm, brush dust from your borrowed knees, and remind your face to carry a little more age and a little less eagerness. Your knuckles touch the doorpost, told wood, your fingerprints in it from another life hand. You breathe the breath that begins conversations you want to last. Athena's hand lifts from your shoulder. The air lightens. The door opens before you knock twice. Joke 3, tucked in the threshold. If your life were a stage play, this would be the cue where the audience leans forward and drops their candy. Keep it quiet. Let the scene earn itself. You lower your eyes, as a stranger should, and ask if a tired traveler might share a corner by the fire. The answer, and the man who gives it, belong to the next breath, the next turn of this path you've walked in your sleep for years. Your island holds its breath with you. The door opens on warmth you can feel on your cheeks before the smoke reaches your nose. 2 dogs surge first, lean, clever. All bark and opinions, then halt mid-stride the moment they catch the way you hold yourself. Not like a thief, but like a man who has been outside long enough to know how to share a fire. Behind them stands a broad-shouldered figure, with the weather baked right into his skin. His beard is field short, his tunic patched with the competence of someone who mends as well as he feeds. He takes you in with a single, professional glance and staff, the lay of your cloak and nods. Stranger, he says, come in. A poor man's house can still give a warm bench. You step across the threshold, bowing your head just enough to honor the roof. The hut is tidy in the way of places where work is constant, tools hung in pairs, cords coiled, a corner for salt, a corner for spare pegs, a corner where a wicker cradle holds a litter of piglets sleeping like punctuation marks. The swineherd you meet, though you don't say his name yet, because names are keys moves with a host's muscle memory. A stool appears. A pail is tipped. Water sluices your hands, cool and metallic from the clay jar. He sets bread and a slice of meat before you, then adds a pinch of salt with a little flourish, as if finishing a dish for a patron. Eat, he says. Even grief needs a full belly to carry it. You thank him softly, keeping your voice in the gravel Athena gave you. Bread, meat, smoke, the low contented chatter of pigs. Outside this, right here, is civilization's heartbeat. You tear and chew while the swineherd talks, the way caretakers do when the day has been long and the ear across the fire looks durable. He curses the suitors with an artistry that would make a sailor blush if we weren't keeping this. PG 213. Their boots on another man's rushes, their hands in another man's bins. Their wine-stained yawns at the songs meant to keep memory alive. They think a house is just furniture, he mutters, poking the coals, and a wife a prize. They've never built either. The dogs settle, the piglets in the cradle sneeze in harmony, then go back to dreaming of spilled grain. Eumaeus eyes your cloak and nods, approving the way you've tied it, one practical man recognizing another's knots. Then he does something you didn't know you needed until it happens. He drapes an extra hide over your shoulders. It smells of sun and clean hay. Nights at the edge of the pens bite harder, he says, and old bones tell tomorrow's weather. You accept without refusing twice. There are gifts you honor by not arguing. mainstream historical anchor, while the fire makes polite small talk with the kettle. Archaeology across the Aegean shows heaps of pig bones at bronze and early iron. Age cites the pig was a staple of diet and sacrifice alike. Swineherds weren't jokes. They managed wealth on the hoof. A man who kept a king's pigs kept a king's winter. Eumaeus carries that authority like it's just another bucket to lift. He asks your story. You give him the version that travels. Well, a life pinballed by wars and weather, a name that isn't yours, losses told in numbers rather than faces. He listens without interrupting, those thick, competent hands resting like two folded tools. When you finish, he pours a cup and sets it near your knee, not on some wobbly stool where it could fall. Small kindness, big aim. The gods love to test us, he says. But they also count what we do to each other while they're busy with their games. You venture a question shaped like a passerby's curiosity. Is the queen safe? Does the sun live? The swineherd's mouth softens on Penelope's name. She weaves, he says, and you see the picture in his eyes. The loom, the night unweaving. The thread that is grief and endurance at once. And the boy, no boy, now he went to find word of his father. I told him to let ghosts deliver their own letters, but youth and love have the same stubborn backbone. The pride he tries to hide is a candle shining through his ribs. Here's your quirky tidbit. Slipped like a raisin into the bread at the women's festival of Thesmophoria. Greek matrons cast piglets into pits as offerings to Demeter, then later retrieved the rich, decomposed remains to fertilize fields. Pig and grain, sacrifice and harvest, the old alchemy of turning what you give up into what feeds you. Remember that next time we talk about looms and patience. It's all the same family of magic. Eumaeus stirs the pot, tastes, nods, and hands you another slice before serving himself last. He jokes once, gentle as a low fence. If hunger comes to a man's hut and finds no stew, it leaves him kinder than if it finds too much wine. You laugh, because the line is good, and because humor's the soft cloth you wrap around harder truths. He talks then about his own beginning, which he does not do for every stranger. Maybe it's your borrowed face. Maybe it's the way you don't rush him. I wasn't born for pigs and fences, he says, eyes turned to a place far beyond the pen. He tells of a nurse who loved him, of Phoenician traders whose tongues were sweet and hands were sticky, of a ship that stole him from his island like a word lifted from a song. I washed up on Ithaca and met a man who could have treated me like driftwood, he says, and here his voice dips, reverent, but he didn't. He looks at you, at the stranger you are wearing, and adds, my lord made me a man with work and trust. That's why the suitors anger me more than hunger ever could. They're not just eating, they're unmaking. Scholars still argue whether Eumaeus is an idealized portrait of Laodicea. Poets wish for nobles and servants holding each other up, or a snapshot of real social bonds in a world where households were the spine of survival. You watch his hands, the way they never stop doing small necessary things, turning a log, checking the pot, tightening a peg, and think the debate will never know the look in his eyes when he says, my lord. The dogs bristle suddenly, but only for practice. It's just the wind rehearsing a change. Eumaeus glances at the door, then at you. If you were my master, he says, half to himself, I'd know by the way you set your cup down. Your fingers freeze in their borrowed choreography. You've set the cup down, a different way, deliberately clumsy, a pebble thrown onto smooth water. He smiles, fog clears, the thought passes. Athena smirks from some corner of the hut where gods sit to enjoy theater. You offer a blessing wrapped in a beggar's voice. He answers with one of his own, eyes going distant, the way men's eyes do when they're sending words ahead of them like scouts. Let him come, he murmurs, storm-scarred, hungry, angry as a winter river. I'll take the scars and the anger if it buys him a step on this floor. He looks back at you and shrugs, suddenly shy at his own intensity. Eat the cold. Hunts the belly first. Joke one tiny and warm as the fires crackle. You're pretty sure the pigs believe they run this household. Eumaeus allows the illusion, because great managers delegate. Night sifts down through the thatch like sifted grain. He lays a bed for you near the fire, a simple stack of fleeces, and a rolled cloak that smells like honest work. He takes the rougher spot himself, closer to the door, spear at arm's reach. The posture of a man who has never once left his duties to luck. You'll be safe here, he says, then adds with a half grin, from the wind, at least. From stories. Those will find you anywhere. Before sleep, he updates you on the clock of the island, which boars have gone rogue, which herdsmen can be trusted to count to the same number twice, which paths the suitors' servants use when they sneak meat that isn't theirs. It's intelligence with pig smell, the kind commanders use when battles look like dinner parties. You store every detail, the way you once stored winds. This bag, at least, you will not open too soon. Joke 2. Tucked under the fleece, you've had palaces with worse thread counts than this hut's hospitality. The fire gentles to a red hush. Outside, pigs rearrange themselves with sleepy grunts, a choir of contentment you didn't know you missed. Somewhere far off, a nightjar stitches the dark with its one-needle song. You roll once, twice, and the cloak settles on your shoulders, like a good promise. Eumaeus is already breathing in that farmhand, cadence too short. One long that says tomorrow starts when the pigs say so. One last whisper of debate trails, the edge of sleep, whether you should tell him now. Athena's warning sits on your tongue like the moly leaf once did. Cool, stubborn, right? Not yet. The first recognition must belong to your son. The first unveiling in this house must be a hand on a shoulder that hasn't known your weight. Since childhood, you turn your face toward the banked coals and let the hut's small world hold you. Joke 3. Softer than ash. If you do start snoring, blame the disguise. Old men get to make those kinds of noises. The pigs breathe, the fire whispers, and in the weave between sound and sleep, you hear Ithaca Island's slow, forgiving heartbeat. You match it. Morning is a promise, with chores attached. You've never minded chores. Dawn peels itself off the hills like golden bark, and Eumaeus is up before the pigs can file their morning complaints. He stirs the fire, snips a remark at a boar who thinks fences are a suggestion, and sets porridge to simmer with the efficiency of a man who has never met the snooze button. You help without announcing you're helping, moving the water jar closer, straightening the kindling pile, small things that say, I am not useless, which is a language farmyards respect. Then the dogs lift their heads, ears pricking toward the path that climbs from town. There's a note in their throats you haven't heard, yet alert, expectant, affectionate, and territorial. Eumaeus's eyebrows go up. Either a friend, he says, or someone about to learn how fast I can throw a peg. The dogs surge, then astonishingly dense. Eumaeus wipes his hands on his tunic and strides out, and you follow slow, letting the disguise do its work. A young man steps into the clearing with travel on his boots and purpose in his spine. He's taller than the boy you left, shoulders broadened by oars and decisions, jaw set with a new patience. You know him in a single, brutal heartbeat, the way the eyes weigh a room. The quick scan for exits and allies, the mouth that tries not to smile too quickly because life has made smiling expensive. Telemachus, your son walks back into the plot like he owns his paragraph now. Eumaeus drops everything literally. The ladle hits the dirt with a splash and wraps the young man in a hug that says, you are mine to worry about, and I have been doing an excellent job at it. Telemachus laughs into the swineherd's shoulder, and you catch the sound the way a dehydrated man catches rain, greedily and with thanks. When they part, the boys know. The man's eyes flick to you, quick and assessing. You lower yours, hunched in your borrowed age, letting him see just enough. the respectful stillness of a stranger grateful for warmth. They step inside. Bread is cut, the good cup is fetched, and Eumaeus talks at marathon pace, pouring 10 days of news into 10 breaths. The suitors angrier, louder, greedier. Your name's still a coin they toss to entertain themselves. Penelope outlasting them with needle and nerve, and how the swineherd told them, repeatedly, and with creative phrasing, that their boots would never be welcome across his threshold. Telemachus listens, nodding, the muscles along his jaw working like oars in a headwind. He has learned to let other people finish their sentences. You sit quiet as furniture and study the profile that used to lean on your knee. The cheekbones are your family's stubborn geometry. The brow is Penelope's steady ledger. The scar on the forearm is new, and clearly the fault of a youthful argument with a fishing hook or a clever branch. You measure what you missed and what somehow survived without you. The room smells of smoke and pig and travel dust. Your throat does that hot, foolish thing throats do when they're stuck between a shout and a whisper. You keep the whisper. Mainstream. Historical anchor to tuck beside the hearth. Young aristocrats really did go on fact-finding journeys. The Greeks called it xenia, building as much as sightseeing. In Pylos and Sparta, where Telemachus has just been guest gifts and intelligence. We're braided together. He's come home, not just taller, but connected. Eumaeus clears his throat and points his beard at you. This one wandered in last night, he says. Good manners, bad luck. Says he's hungry and harmless, which checks out. Slides you a piece of bread without grandstanding, and adds a slice of meat, like hospitality is a reflex. Sir, he says, voice even, you're welcome to what we have. It's not palace fare. The line lands with a dry smile, because you both know palace fare currently comes with a side of theft. You thank him? Scratching just the right amount of gravel into your voice, he asks, where you come from. You give him a version of truth with the names filed off. He doesn't press, which is either wisdom or exhaustion. Then he does something that slices clean through you. He worries about the swineherd's safety if the suitors catch wind that he's hosting you. They'll use any excuse to do harm, he says, rubbing the bridge of his nose the way men do when they're doing the math of impossible choices. I'll get you a cloak, some sandals, a staff less. Tragic. Jokes travel in families, apparently. Here's your quirky tidbit for the morning. In some old Greek lore, a well-timed sneeze was a divine yes and omen sealing plans. Penelope gets one later, when she wishes for suitor comeuppance, and Telemachus sneezes like thunder. In this hut, the pigs provide the sneeze chorus. We'll take it. Eumaeus suggests he trot to town and tell Penelope her son is safe. Telemachus shakes his head. Quick, no public fanfare. I need to drop in like a stone and watch the ripples I choose. He glances at the door as if the suitors might be eavesdropping on the wind. If they learn I'm back before I see my mother, they'll try something rash. Again, the man has acquired strategy. You try not to beam with paternal smugness under your theatrical wrinkles. When Eumaeus steps out to settle a pen gate with a hinge that thinks it's an artist, Athena slides into the hut as a thought that changes the temperature. Her eyes flick between you and the son who is busy being competent. Now, she whispers where only you hear it, and her hand peels the disguise from you like dusk lifting from morning. The grime remains because life is not a makeover montage. The posture changes because love is a lever. You straighten. The lines on your face redraw from disguise to history. Your eyes meet your son's directly, not sidelong through smoke. Telemachus, you say, and you do not need to explain how. You know his name. Names are bridges. You put your feet on this one carefully. He startles, half rises, and does what people do around miracles. He reaches for a rational shelf. Stranger, who are you? The question carries both steel and hope. If you mock me, I have men. If you're a god, I'll bring offerings. If you're else, say it plainly. Not a god, you answer. Smiling because the idea is charming, and also because Athena is somewhere behind you, trying not to smirk. Your father. The word lands like a dropped anvil wrapped in silk. He stares, measuring your face against a memory built mostly of stories and a few toddler-sized flashes. The scar above your knee from the boar on Parnassus, the old true one, catches the firelight. The set of the mouth Penelope sometimes mimics when the shuttle sticks. The laugh lines carved by choosing humor over bitterness more often than not. You watch the recognition light through him, like dawn through a beehive, slow, golden, unstoppable. He covers his face with both hands, not in shame but in shock, then drops them and steps forward fast, checking himself at the last inch, as if the air might break. It doesn't. You both do that awkward, perfect half-laugh, half-cry men do when their hearts arrive before their words, and then you're holding each other in an embrace that fixes a decade's worth of misfiled breaths. The pigs, being excellent, chorus, grunt their approval. "Father," he says into your shoulder, and the room changes shape to accommodate that word. You feel the tremor in his voice, relief, anger at time, joy sharpened by the promise of work. You pull back just far enough to see his eyes. "We have to be careful," you murmur, "because the next part is machinery and theater. Your mother must be shielded from the suitor's panic. We'll go in as beggar and son. We'll measure the men who eat our bread. We'll count their throats with our eyes and choose where mercy ends." Historians still argue whether the so-called Telemachy, the book's opening arc about your son's journey, was composed separately and stitched to the main epic later. In this hut, the narrative seems feel perfect. The boy who went seeking a father returns to find a plan. The poem inhales. The household will exhale. You lay out the tactic in a whisper. Eumaeus keeps the secret. You enter the hall, under the mask Athena gave back to you. Telemachus hides away the best weapons and leaves a few inferior ones to avoid suspicion. Signal, timing, doors barred, the bow saved for last. He nods at each hinge of the plan, adding small, clever adjustments from what he learned in Pylos and Sparta, where two-seat allies, which servants will stand with you when standing is dangerous. Strategy braids itself between you like rope that will not snap. Joke one soft as fleece. You tell him the first rule is still don't open mysterious bags, and he grins like a man who's heard the family story too many times to risk repeating it. Joke too gentle as steam. You add and don't eat sacred cattle, and he says he prefers lentils anyway. Joke three's leapy as pigs. You promise that when this is over, the only suitors in the hall will be goats trying to charm the salt bucket. Eumaeus returns to find two men sitting a little closer than before, eyes bright with a storm no weather can name. He senses it, bless him, but asks no questions, offers more bread, and says only, "Tell me where to carry your words, and I'll carry them." You touch his forearm, the briefest credit paid toward a larger detan, say, to the queen, when the time is right. Outside, the morning breaks fully. The island's heartbeat lifts into a march. You and your son share a look that puts your names back in the same sentence. Then you both stand. There is a house to reclaim, a loom to liberate, and a generation to stitch back together. The door creaks old hinge. Friendly sound, and the path to the great hall opens like a line you've been waiting years to read aloud. And now, with the doors barred against the night breeze, and the lamp turned low, you let the story loosen its shoulders and lengthen each breath. The sea that chased you for years is far away, a silver band beyond the hills, and its voice, when it reaches through the olive groves, is only a hush, only a friendly shiver at the edges of sleep. The house has settled. The rafters creak the way old wood does when it remembers storms and enjoys the stillness even more. You picture the bed, again, that living root in the floor, the frame warm with hands, the grain smooth where time has polished it. You lie back into that certainty, feeling the way it refuses to be moved, the way it promises that not everything is drift and tide. Outside, a nightjar stitches the dark with its soft needle song. A dog sighs and curls tighter. In the yard, a quiet breeze combs through time and lets it release that gentle, green sweetness. Each breath you take gets longer, softer. The island's heartbeat slows, and you match it without trying. You're carried, not by a ship now, but by the steady current of rest. Through rooms dim with safe shadows, along a corridor where memory hangs like woven cloth and does nothing but soften the air. Your thoughts find wider spacing between them, like oars easing until only the wake moves, like words fading to whisper at the end of a very long, kind sentence. If any last tension lingers, let it sink. You've survived storms and stories, so you don't have to sail them tonight. Let the olive's cool shade gather over you. Let the hearth hold its warmth. Let the house keep watch with its old, patient beams. You are home. The gods are quiet, and sleep slow, certain, and generous comes in on a gentle tide.